The 2003 Acura MDX Touring, the 10th of the 20 Hondas I've owned in my life. We picked up this Acura in 2003 right after the birth of our second child. My wife had been driving our 2000 Honda CR-V SE for over 2 years now. With 2 kids, we decided it was time to move up in size again. About 6 months earlier, I had already been forced out of my 2001 Honda S2000, as well as my 1988 Honda Civic DX hatchback as a daily driver, replacing them both with the 2002 Acura TL Type-S for this same reason. So we went down to our local Acura dealer and traded in the CR-V for a fully loaded MDX Touring. For my wife and 2 young kids, it was a massive upgrade in space, comfort, and compatibility. And let's be honest, the MDX quickly became the official family vehicle. This meant that the floor and the rear seats were constantly covered in slobber, food, cereal, and everything else that comes with toddlers. It handled the job perfectly. If you want more background on how Acura fits into the Honda world, as well as the Accord platform architecture this MDX is based on, check out the previous episodes. Under the hood, the 2003 MDX Touring introduced something very important for Honda, a brand new 3.5-liter single overhead cam VTEC J Series V6. This was the early version of the J35, an engine family Honda would use for the next 2 decades across SUVs, minivans, and sedans. With the MDX, Acura also introduced Honda's VTM4 all-wheel drive system. VTM4 was more advanced than the real-time 4-wheel drive system used in the CR-V, using electronic controls to send torque to the rear wheels when needed. I'll dig deeper into how that system works later. Performance was solid for the time. The MDX could run a 0 to 60 in about 7.7 and a quarter mile in roughly 16 seconds. For a mid-sized SUV in the early 2000s, those were some very respectable numbers. And surprisingly, its handling numbers were also very competitive for the class. And the reason for that comes down to one very important engineering choice. Most SUVs used to be trucks, body on frame, heavy, rough riding, basically pickup trucks with a different body. By the early 2000s, that was starting to change. When the Acura MDX launched in 2001, it was one of the first mid-size luxury SUVs built on the unibody platform instead of a truck frame with leaf springs. Instead of using a body-on-frame layout like the Ford Explorer or a Chevy Tahoe, the MDX used a car-style structure derived from Honda Accord architecture. This brought several advantages. The MDX was lighter, handled more like a sedan, and delivered a much smoother ride. It also improved interior packaging, allowing 3 rows of seats without the bulk of a truck chassis. And because the structure was more rigid and integrated, it improved both safety and fuel efficiency. Today, this design approach is everywhere, but the early 2000s, the MDX was one of the vehicles helping define what the modern crossover SUV would become. In the early 2000s, Acura had a bit of a problem. The brand had the legendary Acura NSX, but the rest of the lineup often felt like slightly upgraded Hondas. Sales were flattening, and competitors like the BMW 5 Series and Lexus RX were gaining ground. Then came the MDX. When it launched, it wasn't just another SUV. It was one of the first luxury crossovers built specifically for the North American market. It combined a car-based platform, a strong J-Series V6, and Acura's new VTM4 all-wheel drive system. And importantly, it was built in Alabama, United States of America, not imported from Japan. The result? The MDX quickly became Acura's best-selling vehicle. For several years, it carried a huge portion of Acura's sales. In many ways, the early 2000s Acura lineup struggled, but the MDX, it was exactly the vehicle needed at exactly the right time. Honda? Japanese car, right? Not exactly. By the early 2000s, Honda had already built a massive manufacturing network inside the United States. It started in 1982 with the Marysville Auto Plant in Ohio, where Honda began building the Accord. That made Honda the first Japanese automaker to produce cars in America. From there, the network grew quickly. The Anna England plant in Ohio began producing engines. The East Liberty Auto Plant added another major assembly facility. In 1996, Honda opened Honda Transmission Manufacturing in Russell's Point, producing transmissions and hybrid components. By the late 1990s, Honda was even producing small engines and power equipment in South Carolina. Then in 2001, Honda opened its massive Alabama auto plant building SUVs, minivans, and trucks for North America. By the 2020 era, Honda had built an entire nationwide manufacturing system across the United States, and that's what made the next part possible. By 2020, many people still thought of Honda and Acura as Japanese cars. But the reality was different. Honda had spent nearly 4 decades building cars in the United States. And by 2020, most Hondas sold in America were actually built in North America. Vehicles like the Accord, Odyssey, Pilot, and Ridgeline were assembled in the United States. Even Acura models like the TLX and RDX were built in Ohio. But, quote, made in America doesn't just mean where the car is assembled. The U.S. government tracks something called the American Part Content, measuring how many components come from the U.S. or Canada. By 2020, many Honda models had 55 to 70% North American part content. Engines were built in Ohio and Alabama, transmissions in Georgia, and the final assembly spread across plants in Ohio, Indiana, and Alabama. So while Honda is a Japanese company, a large percentage of the cars Americans buy are actually engineered and built right here in North America. For the past 40 years, I've heard, "Why don't you buy American?" from boomers. I always respond, this Honda is more American than that, quote, American car you're driving now. They then say, nuh-uh, follow the money. I respond, Honda Motor Company of America is an American corporation which is owned, like most, by stockholders across the world. Look it up yourself. Open up any LLM like ChatGPT and ask it this question. Honestly, I can't say anything bad about our 2003 Acura MDX Touring. It was a fantastic vehicle for our family. We had no reliability problems, and it handled daily life with our kids extremely well. The luxury features were excellent, but by around 2005, we started realizing something. The MDX was designed more as a luxury vehicle, not necessarily as the ultimate family utility vehicle. Around that time, car interiors were massively evolving rapidly, especially the electronics. Storage solutions, seating flexibility, and family-focused features were becoming more important. So we eventually traded the MDX in for a 2005 Honda Pilot EXL fully loaded, even with the entertainment system. And yes, the Pilot was almost the exact same vehicle underneath as the MDX. The MDX was more luxury focused, the Pilot was more family focused. And I'll talk about the Pilot in our next episode. If you enjoy this Gen X Honda Enthusiast series, please like and subscribe so I can continue documenting the 20 Hondas I've owned over the past 35 years.